Okay, so we're going to do chapter 5 homework questions, go over a few of them. But before we do so, I just want to quickly review a couple of ideas. This chapter is primarily looking at elasticity of demand, and elasticity of demand is looking at the relationship on the demand curve. So we already know by law of demand, when price goes up, consumers will buy less, and we say quantity demanded goes down. And when price goes down, people will purchase more or quantity demanded will increase. All elasticity of demand does is it just gives us a little extra information. It will tell us by how much the quantity demanded will change when there's a change in the price. So it's giving us a sense of, extent or amount of, it's really correct way of saying it is percent change in the quantity demanded when there's a percent change in price. Now there is a formula that we use, and below, if you take a look here, I've just posted the formula. It's called the midpoint formula. There's different ways one can figure out elasticity of demand. But the midpoint formula, it's just a matter of mathematically doing the numbers. So what you'll do for percent change, you'll put in an end value minus the start value divided by the start value, and then you take the average, and then for the quantity demanded, so these end and start values for the percent change in quantity demanded will be your quantity demanded. And then you'll do the same thing for percent change in price. You'll take the end value, the start value, divide it by the start value, and then do the end value plus start value over 2 for that average. And then you'll take whatever number you get for the percent change and divide it by the number you get for percent change in price. So below, you'll see there's an example. So you're told price rises from $8 to $12. So the start value there for the price would be 8, the end value is 12, and the quantity demanded falls from 110 to 90. So the start value was 110 and you ended up at 90. So you would just plug in this information using that midpoint formula. And if you went ahead and did all of that, you should come up with the number -1/2 or 1/2. It will depend on the professor or instructor teaching. I tend to keep the negative value because of the negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. But some books will sometimes, and some professors, other professors will actually want you to give the absolute value, which means rather than reporting it as a negative, you'll just take the absolute value and just give the number a half. But keep in mind, law of demand, price elasticity is always a negative because of that relationship. Okay, so another quick reminder is the relationship between elasticity and total revenue for a firm. So quick reminder, total revenue is the money that a firm is bringing in, which does not take account of the cost. So remember, revenue is not the same as profits for a firm. Profits for a firm are where it's just revenue minus their costs. We're just simply right now talking about revenue. So if we're the dollar store, we sell every item in our store for $1 and we sell 100 units, the Q would be 100, our price would be $1, so our revenue for the day would be $100. So when we start talking about elasticity of demand, which is looking at the relationship between price and quantity, you can clearly see that elasticity is definitely going to have impact on the firm's revenue. So what we find is that when we're on the elastic portion of the demand curve, which means price changes, whether it be an increase or decrease, there's going to be big changes in quantity demanded. That's going to have an impact on that firm's revenue. So if, for example, we've got a couple examples here. If the price increases and we're on the elastic portion of the demand curve, that is going to mean that the revenue for that firm will drop. And here's why. Because when you increase the price goes up and there'll be a big, huge decrease in the quantity demanded. I like using big so that you get the point. So we get the price increase, we get this huge loss of business, if you like, and that's going to then cause the revenue for the firm to drop. meaning the firm has lost such a huge amount of business when they increase that price that the loss in business, that big huge drop in quantity demand, isn't compensated by the price increase. That's why revenue would go down. And then vice versa. If this same firm were to drop the price on the elastic portion of the demand curve, what would happen there is it would actually cause their revenue to increase. And here's why. When the price goes down, there's going to be a huge increase, going the other way now, huge increase in quantity demanded. So even though we've dropped the price, we have more than compensated for the loss in price for each unit we sell because there's such a big, huge increase in the quantity demanded that we're selling. So that is actually going to drive up this firm's revenue. And then if I just scroll down and let's say we were on the inelastic portion of the demand curve. Inelastic, IN, means not. So inelastic means not very responsive. So that means if price goes up or down, it doesn't matter what direction, there's not going to be very much of a change in quantity demanded. So if we're on the inelastic portion of the demand curve and price goes up, what would happen is it would actually drive up the revenue. So this is why when the price increases, again, you're on the inelastic portion, there's not going to be much of a change. There'll be a very small decrease, small drop in quantity demanded. So that means the firm hasn't lost a huge amount of business when they've increased that price. So the small loss in business is going to be more than compensated by that price increase, so our revenue would go up in that case. Now vice versa, if this particular firm were to drop the price and we were on the inelastic portion of demand, that would actually drive their revenue down because the price goes down. Yes, the quantity goes up, quantity demanded would go up, but it would just go up by a very small amount. So this drop in price has not been compensated by a big, huge increase in business. In fact, it's just been a very small increase in business. So this small extra business won't be compensated by the price drops. Thus, total revenue for the firm will go down. So now let's take a look at a few questions. Okay, so we're going to start on a few of the questions, Chapter 5. So I'm going to put up the first question. And this one is asking you about, which of the following goods are more elastic. So a couple reminders here about elasticity. For something to be more elastic, remember that means big changes in quantity demanded when price changes. So there are a few things that cause goods, services to be more or less elastic. One of them is number of substitutes. So remember, the more substitute products a good has, the more elastic it tends to be because you can respond to price changes because you have other things you can go and purchase. Income is also another one that can have something being more or less elastic. Time can also be, the longer the time period you have to find, other alternatives, that makes things more elastic. So that's what you want to be thinking of, when you're doing this set or this particular question actually. And I'll just give you one little hint on this because you can actually get this turned around in your mind really, really easily. So keep in mind, the more specific a good tends to be, the more substitutes it will tend to have. So again, the more specific we're talking, the more substitute products they'll tend to be, meaning it'll be more elastic. So I'll give you an answer to one of them where it says pens in general, so that's the last one, or blue point pens. So pens in general means all kinds of pens. A blue ballpoint pen, on the other hand, is really, really specific. It's one type of pen. Ballpoint pen is the one that will tend to be more elastic on this particular question. Okay, question number 2. This one is exactly what we did on the introduction on this short video. So all you're going to do is apply the elasticity of demand formula at the beginning of this short tutorial and use, remember the end and start values and just plug in, and I think you'll have no trouble with that. So refer back to the beginning of this video for this particular question. Okay, so question 3 here. This question is looking at that relationship between price, quantity demanded, and total revenue. So just quick reminder, since it's talking about quantity demanded decreasing, we know that means there had to have been a price increase here. So you're told here, price has increased, quantity demanded has gone down by 18%, and it has also caused total revenue to decline. That means the price increase was not enough because there was such a huge drop in the quantity demanded that drove down revenue. So what would that mean about this demand curve? I think you should be able to answer it now. This question is, you got to do it in parts. So again, remember, these can be a little tedious, so just take your time with it. Make sure you read these questions one at a time. So at the very beginning, the thing you want to notice here is read the question. I always like reading them at least twice. So you're told cups of coffee and cups of milk tea are substitute products. So if you were writing this, I'd write that down. So one, you're told coffee and milk tea are substitutes. And then another very important piece of information that you're given right away is it says assume that they both have elastic demand. So elastic meaning price changes in one direction or the other won't really matter for these goods. There's going to be a large change in the quantity demanded, or correct way of saying that is the percent change in price, there'll be a larger percent change in quantity demanded. Okay, so with all of that, the first part of the question asks the following. It says, show the effect of the crop destruction on the coffee market, or on the market for coffee beans. So again, you're told that a hurricane has destroyed half of the beans for coffee. So the question is that going to cause supply to decrease? So you'll use your mouse, remember, to shift the curve, or will it cause it to increase? So whichever one you decide, again, it's half of the beans have been destroyed, so hopefully you should be able to determine, what that does to supply. Okay, the next part of this question is now asking you what happens in the market for actual coffee. So the first part of the question was the coffee bean market, which is a product that is used to make coffee. So if from the previous question, depending on what you did to the supply curve, you're actually going to do exactly the same thing to the supply curve for the coffee market. Because when coffee beans production drops, it will also cause a production decrease in actual coffees. So you're going to go ahead and shift this picture exactly the same way as you shifted the question previous to this. And then after that, you're just going to kind of fill in what overall happens to the price, to the quantity demanded, and so forth. And the way you're able to answer the questions about total expenditure, I would just think of that, if I were you, as the revenue for the firm. And keeping in mind what you were told at the very beginning of this question, which was this is an elastic, it's elastic, so meaning it's responsive to these price changes. So with the changes happening in the market due to the destruction of the coffee beans, which then impacts the price of the coffee, you then want to determine, since it's elastic, meaning quantity demanding will be big changes, what will happen to the firm's, what will happen to the consumer's expenditures, or you can think of it as what will happen to the firm's revenue. It will work either way you think of that. Then the next part of the question is, it says, show the effect of the price change in cups of coffee you identified on the second graph on the market for the cups of milk tea. So be very careful here. This question is asking now about milk tea. So you were told at the beginning of this question that coffee and milk tea were substitutes. So depending on what has happened in the coffee market, the price of coffee is definitely changed because there were shifts that happened in that market from the above questions. that now will have an impact on milk tea, the demand for milk tea. So what you want to do is figure out, okay, is there going to be an increase? So you'll use your mouse, or will there be a decrease in demand based on what happened previously in this market? And then you can answer this true-false question. Okay, this question is just continuing on. I don't think you really need much help here. It's just telling you if a demand is inelastic. Just quick reminder on that. Inelastic means price goes up or price goes down. The quantity demanded won't change by very much. So it's just looking at, okay, the inelastic, portion of demand, how will that impact revenue? And then you have this question down here.